Welcome back, everyone. After a lot of really good feedback we got from everyone for our little experiment of the Expat Coaches Hangout, today is the second time that Thais and I want to just hang out and have a little talk. And we were thinking, because at the end of our last conversation, at the end of our episode 1, we had this realization that where it really starts with everyone, with all of our clients, is something around identity, but I would argue that it's even more basic than that, because before, at least for me, I don't know, you tell me how it is for you, but with my clients, usually the first part of the coaching contract that we have very often focuses on a lot of logistics, on a lot of physical aspects. How about you?
With my clients as well, especially when I'm coaching the partners, because they still don't have a routine defined for them. Sometimes they have children, so there is like a routine that they are forced to create. But especially when there is a family without children involved, they have this need to set up what's going to be their routine and what are their day going to look like. So there is this focus on just rebuilding what day-to-day life looks like.
Yeah. And I think, well, you said, especially if there's no children, I think it goes both ways, right? With children, I think you by default create a routine very quickly, because that's just how children work, right? They get up at a certain time and then this is how their day flows. And then they usually have either daycare or they have school or whatever. But when there are no children, I think we believe that as adults, we're just free to do whatever. But the reality, I feel, is that we also need that routine. We need it badly.
Yeah.
I was just reading a scientific article the other day that talked about exactly that, how if we have predictability in our life, how it helps us, our bodies, and also our minds to really cope much better with stress, to improve mental health and all of these things. And this is something that a lot of adults believe, oh, it's fine. I don't need a bedtime. I don't need these rules for myself. But the fact is, when you do create a routine, it helps.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think especially when you have all that freedom, right? You have the space to sleep what time you want or wake up the time you want. There is nobody waiting for you. Like, there are no expectations. So you can feel free in the beginning, especially if you just moved somewhere new and you have some break from work. So you want to enjoy yourself and relax. But after a while, I notice in myself, in my own experience, but also with my clients, there is no meaning on it anymore. And you want to feel needed, you want to feel wanted, but there is nothing around you that needs you. Your partner goes to work and you sit at home and then you think, okay, what do I do now with my time?
Yes, I think boredom comes in, but it's not just boredom. It's almost like the routine gives you an anchor. Yeah. It grounds you. It gives you a sense of, I am human. I'm a person. I have a life. Whereas if you get up whenever, if you sleep whenever, if you do whatever you want, whenever you want, that seems seductive. But I think the more you're tempted to go in the wrong direction, in the direction that harms you rather than helps you. So how do you work with your clients on this?
Yeah, good question. I was going to ask you the same. I think what I do with my clients is just with the acceptance in first place, right? Because I think it's very hard. I notice with them that there is a pattern to go back and compare everything that I had in my country and everything that I don't have now. So they get stuck in that comparison and they are not able to focus on rebuilding what is next, like the next step. So I try to really work with them on the acceptance part to say, okay, I know it's hard. You had a career, a life, a routine, expectations from you, and now you have to start over. So really working on that acceptance that now things are not like they used to be, but there is the place to explore new things and understand what you want to add to your routine. And I think we also mentioned last time how sometimes then there are choices that are made by default or by other people for us. So I invite them to reflect what they want to choose for themselves now that they are in control and they have this fresh blank sheet to rewrite their story.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're saying, okay, let's not compare, because when you compare, usually people only remember the good times, right? They only remember the positive aspects. And do you ever redirect though? Because I know that with some clients, what seems to be most helpful is just to say, let's stop, let's not compare. With other clients, it might be, yes, let's grieve what was, but also let's look at the positives, right? So let's look at both the past and the future, and let's work in the present to make that future a reality. What are your experiences on this?
Yeah. I manage it around the client's need, like you mentioned. There is this grief, and sometimes some of them, they just need this space to go through that grief and say, yeah, it sucks. I had a life, I had a career, and everything now is in thin air. I don't know, it just disappeared and I don't have it. And so it's really sometimes giving them the space to work on that loss and that grief and just feel the emotions and give the space for the emotions, because I feel also like they don't feel that they can talk about that with their family that stayed behind. They feel like they have to show that everything is well and they are happy.
God needs to be Instagrammable, right? It needs to only be a highlight reel. Oftentimes, people back home, they may not have been 1,000% supportive of the move in the first place, right? So if you let any of the cracks show, then they'll be, we told you you should never have left. We told you that our country was the best ever.
Or they downplay the difficulty of it, right? Because they don't understand. They say, oh, but this was your dream. Or, or for me, at least personally, it was a lot about thinking my family will not understand what I'm going through because it's not something they went through themselves.
Yeah. And that's why I feel that starting to have connections with the people on the ground, with other expats, can be super helpful at that stage. It's sometimes getting too comfortable in that expat bubble. That's a different story, but that's usually a different stage, right? In the very beginning, it can be helpful to meet people who get it, who just understand that, yes, it is hard. Giving everything up is hard. Starting all over new is hard. And it's both, right? It's the super high highs and the super low lows. And everything just seems to be more emotional and everything seems to hit you a lot harder in the beginning because you're super giddy, right? It's your the dream. You're going to go there, and whatever that is, I think that also looks different for different people. There are some who are like, I'm going to go to this country and I will use my time for personal development. I will use my time to travel. I will be living because my income level is a lot different from what I had back home. Or I will fill in the blank, right? It could be anything. And then also the disappointment when it's not like that all day, every day. But there are when you start to get homesick, there are days when you doubt. You just doubt whether this was the right decision in the first place.
And I think also, right, there are so many emotions, that grief, that doubt. And also with a few clients, what I try to approach is asking them, why did you choose this move? Like to remind them what was the motivation. Because when they are in that shock that, okay, this is my new reality and this is what's happening and what have I done? And then they are only remembering the good things about the old place. So I ask them, what is it that made you want to change? So they started thinking about the factors that led to that decision to move. I find it interesting, and I want to also hear your point of view, how then there is this emotion, and we need sometimes to throw a bit of rational thinking to break it, right? To really decide, okay, what were the things that were not working? Because I didn't decide out of the blue. I really had a plan and I made a decision. So why did I make this decision? How do you approach it?
By that time, you get a good feel for how people approach it. Like you have people who are by nature extremely positive and who like to just blend out all the negatives. There are other people who are, they would say realists, I would say maybe pessimists, who are always looking for the things that aren't working. I would approach it differently depending on what personality the client is. That's one thing. Another thing is also sometimes clients didn't choose, or I mean, chose, but with more or less enthusiasm. I see that a lot. It can depend on many factors, but what stage of life they're in, how long they've been in the relationship, what the power dynamics are within the relationship. There are a lot of factors that play into this as well. I feel as the coach, you have to really be careful and you have to be whatever the client needs in that moment. And that sometimes cheerleader, sometimes sprinkling in that little bit of realism, that sometimes the person that gently prods them and says, well, you chose this in the first place. It can be different things. And I feel that because it's such an emotional roller coaster, it can be all of the above at different points in time.
Yes.
Sometimes even within the same session, you get to do a little bit of all of that because there is such a volatility to the emotions at that.
Yeah, and I think also with the emotions, there are so many factors that affect, right? I think sometimes our perception of how things look, it depends a lot on how our emotions, how regulated we are. So really...
Something as simple as the weather. If it's raining, if it's been raining for 2 weeks, then even the most positive person can turn into this like, oh, why did I come here? Like, what is this? All of this was a mistake.
And I love how you mentioned the weather, because actually for me in the Netherlands, it's a place that rains all the time and it's gray and like so little sun. And I remember that I had to start my work at 7 and I would have to bike because it was the best way to get to work. And sometimes at 7 in the morning, I would arrive at work completely wet. And in that moment, I would question, why did I choose this? Like, this is not for me. I'm not prepared for it. My best friend, she's from Sri Lanka, and I met her in Germany. And at the time, she was, as soon as the weather got worse towards autumn, like because even German summer is not comparable to Sri Lankan weather, right? So, and she would always be like, what is wrong with this country? It's like, honey, you chose to come here. But it's weather, and we don't want to acknowledge that because that's such a ridiculous reason, right? And it can be the other way. If it's too hot, for instance, or if you're used to having 4 seasons and then you move to a place where there aren't 4 seasons anymore, like all of this can play a role. The change of the seasons for a lot of people is deeply emotional as well because it reminds you of your childhood, it reminds you of what your family used to do, things like that. I really believe that those changes in the environment and in the weather can affect a lot the mood and the emotions and how the sense of belonging in that place, because even the seasons can be new and can be like an element that you're not prepared for.
Another thing that I found really influences how people feel about it is how they prepared themselves before they even moved. Everything is so crazy before they move, right? They have to organize a transnational, sometimes transcontinental move and everything that entails. And a lot of people I know, they will have worked until the very last possibility, the very last day, and then they're moving. So basically they hand in their laptop and their work phone, and then the next morning they sit on the plane. And then you don't really have time to say your goodbyes. You don't really have time to also process and even think about what will that be once I arrive for my clients in China, for your clients in the Netherlands, in the Czech Republic, or elsewhere in Europe, right? Is one thing. Another thing is also how easy you find it to start meeting people in a new place. And this can be lots of factors. How outgoing am I? How easy is it for me to walk up to people I've never seen and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and nice to meet you. So there's that, but also, am I moving to a big place, to a small place? Is it international? Is it more monocultural, right? How is the geopolitical climate between my home country and my host country? I know that for a lot of Americans, it's been really rough going to China because there's a lot of political tensions. And so they're like, oh, people are not going to like me. And a lot of my clients in China, they don't move to the biggest cities. I mean, they move to, small towns of 8 to 10 million people. And they imagine that it will be quite international, and they realize that maybe it isn't. And that the pool of people they can even communicate with is very small. I would expect that that might be the case for your clients in the Czech Republic.
That's a great question, because I think for us is a bit the reverse shock, because Brazil is really a huge country. So when you move to Europe, the countries, they tend to be much smaller. And for us, in many places, you are not exposed, and especially if you're not living in the big capital cities, you are not exposed so much to other cultures and other languages and other people. So it's very much, so I understand the Chinese from the point of view that there are so many of them that they don't need to speak another language. You can just be yourself. You don't have that impact because the international community is much smaller comparing to the national. So for us, it's the opposite shock, right? That we come here and then it's much smaller.
One speaks Portuguese. What's wrong with these people?
But it's also that also when you arrive into a country, for example, the Netherlands, where 90% of the population speaks English. And for us in Brazil, maybe it's 40 or 60. I don't know exactly the statistics, but we are less used to the language. But for example, when I come to the Netherlands, the people say, why don't you speak Dutch? And then it's like there is also this expectation, why do you come to my country and you don't speak my language? So I think there is also that expectation. Now with my Czech family, right? I've been here for almost 4 years now. They are like, why you don't speak Czech like yet? And why you're still communicating English with your partner? Because like there is a process to learn the language and really feel comfortable to express yourself. So it's not something we just download to our brains and it happens.
Another problem is not all languages are equally easy to learn for all people, right? If you're a German speaker and you want to learn Dutch, that is fairly easy. If you're a Portuguese speaker and you want to learn Dutch, it's not quite as easy unless you've learned English before. Then again, that makes it easier. But I would expect that for learning Czech, Dutch might have helped a little, right?
Not at all.
I thought there was a little bit of a Germanic sort of influence.
No, not at all. It just actually makes it more confusing because a lot of Czechs speak German and I speak Dutch. So they speak German to me and I understand a little bit, but not fully. So I noticed that I'm mixing Dutch and Czech, and they are thinking I'm speaking German. So yeah. So it was very interesting to learn. I was in the Netherlands for 10 years and finally feeling comfortable in the language. And then I moved to the Czech Republic and it's completely
but at least in Hungary, there's that blessing because Hungarian is so much harder.
Yes. That's what the Czech people tell me as well.
I think the language, and this is for China, this is a big deal, especially those of my clients who know they will probably only be there for 2 or 3 years. Then the question is, how much do I need to learn the language?
Yeah.
And that's to me, that's also part of finding your place, right? Because knowing the language will make things so much easier.
Yeah.
But also the question is, how much effort do I have to put into knowing it to a level that is actually going to help me? I would argue that a lot of the motivation for learning a language and learning it well also comes from how useful do I think it's going to be for me? Yeah. How necessary is it for me? And that's where I think some of my clients fall short because they're just like, yeah, I'm trying. Inside of themselves, they're like, not really, because they already know that they will be out of there shortly. Yeah. And so they have this idea that Chinese is way too hard. No one can learn it anyway, which it is hard, but it's always a matter of how can I analyze it in a way that I figure out exactly what I need to know. And actually, what we do in our Thrive in China package, part of that is language classes. And of course, it's not going to take you to a level where you're going to be business fluent, but it's just a matter of let's analyze where you need some Chinese language skills, and then let's train you just in those, right? So even with 20 hours of self-study and a couple of one-on-one classes, you can be at a level where you feel comfortable enough to communicate with people. And then it's always this, well, at least they tried, right? And then you can go back to English if that doesn't work.
And it just came to my mind as you were explaining it, how we are talking about finding your place and navigating day-to-day life when you move. I think one of the biggest challenge, because although maybe some countries they might speak English, but when you go to the supermarket, probably all the food will be in their native language. So you need some notion of the language to survive, to really buy your groceries.
Not anymore. Technology saves us all, because now people just take a picture and it translates automatically.
That's true.
Sometimes it translates very, very, very weird things, but at least you know whether you're buying chicken or beef. My first time as a tourist in Finland, that was funny, because the Finns love dairy products, but for some reason, at least at the time, a lot of the milk was exactly the same packaging with the same cartoon cow on it, but in different colors. And it was, this was pre-phone translation apps and all of that stuff. And so it was like, okay, do we want the orange cow, the blue cow, the green cow, the purple cow, or the whatever, something else? And then we were standing there with our little pocket dictionary, and we were trying to figure out which of these words is the one that I need to translate. That was rough. And once we ended up buying whipping cream instead of milk.
I had similar situation where for a while my clothes, they smelled very weird and I didn't know what was happening. So I realized after a while that I thought I was buying softener for the clothes, but because I saw a little bear in the picture, right? So I assumed, okay, this is softener, but actually it was special soap for wool. So I was washing my clothes with regular soap and soap for the wool. Okay. So the clothes would come out of the washer and they smelled so bad because it was so much soap and I just didn't know what I was doing wrong.
Yes, the struggle is real. When I'm looking at all of these logistics, right? And this is, we've only touched upon a few. I know that now I mentioned technology making things easier, but in a way it's still hard because with technology, you assume that everyone communicates in the same way. Like you always assume that people, for instance, use the same apps, which is not the case. I don't know, what does Brazil use? In the Czech Republic, I think they use WhatsApp, right? For messaging.
That's actually a bit complicated. I think here they actually create Facebook profiles. They don't put any information on their Facebook because they want to use the Messenger.
Oh, okay. So they use Messenger. Okay. And in Brazil?
In Brazil, WhatsApp. Yeah. And I think now Telegram, maybe.
Yeah,
but
because every country has their own. And sometimes you would think that they're the same, but they're really not. I feel in a lot of European countries, WhatsApp is widely used. But there's countries that use Viber. In Asia, you have Line and Kakao Talk, and China, of course, WeChat. But with China, it goes deeper than that because WeChat is this super app that does everything. And also, that means that a lot of companies don't even have websites. If you search online, Google is censored, so you can't Google. But even if you're using Baidu or some other search engine and you're looking up a company website, it's not there. You don't find information online. You find them in groups on WeChat, but then you need to be invited to the right groups. You're missing information and you're missing context. You're like, there's no information online in China. Not true.
You're just looking the wrong channel.
Technology helps. Technology can throw up different hurdles, different roadblocks, right?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit, right, about navigating the supermarket life, the technology. We talk a bit about the language as well. Is there anything else that we might be missing about the logistics and adapting to the place?
Transportation, because that's another one. I think transportation can be vastly different, not just in what you're using, but there are places where transportation is easy and there are places where transportation is a lot more complicated. Like in Europe, in certain countries, if you move to the countryside, if you don't have a car, that's it. You're toast. In China, before it was taxis, and now it's all these ride-sharing apps. And ride sharing apps work a lot better because a lot of them have English interfaces, so you can just use the app and still communicate. And some of them even translate everything. Like you can type in English and it will translate into Chinese automatically for the driver for you to communicate. So that's nice.
Yeah.
But it's for all of this, again, you need to first figure out what that is, right?
So what is it that you tell your clients how to survive this phase of adaptation to the place and the logistics? What is your advice?
I think for the logistics phase, I find that I sometimes turn consultant rather than coach, because there are some, I mean, you can ask as many coaching questions as you want, but if they're missing information, if they're missing basic info, then that's not going to help them. So that's also why, again, for our clients, we do packages where they have more than just coaching. So in the coaching, it's more about who were you before you came? Who are you going to be when you're here? And that plays into what we'll probably be talking about next time, which is like, what's my purpose here, right? So there's that. And also it's the, as you said, the encouragement on the one side, the little pinch of realism on the other side, the stop comparing your old self to your new self, those types of things, I think go more into the coaching. But then some of it really is just an information gap. And there's nothing for it but to supply that information. And that could be anything from how do I figure out these apps to just invite me into the right groups where people can answer my questions, basically.
So you offer them as well on top of the coaching, this surviving tool.
Yes, because especially in the beginning, a lot of people think that that's all they need, which I don't believe it is, but it's definitely something that is useful. And also, if you have to, of course, you can figure everything out by yourself. I have extremely capable clients. Of course they can. But do they have to? And should they? Maybe not. Maybe I can save them time and energy and set them up for success that way, rather than just have them flounder and figure things out by themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. With my clients, most of the time, I'm offering them mostly the coaching support. But like you said, there are moments that you say, okay, I need to step out of the coaching role. And do you want some practical information to help you just navigate life in the country? And then I provide them as well with the links, informations, and just some practical tips on how to navigate the new country.
Yeah. The niche is so small. I've done all of this work I've done before because it's the same kind of questions over and over and over again. And so I put together like workbooks and survival guides and all those things that I just give to people. And then when something like this comes up in the coaching, I'm just, I've already prepared something. How about you look at this one? Well, here's that information. It a little easier, and also it doesn't disrupt the coaching flow quite as much. I think I would love it if next time we could maybe talk about more the purpose, like why now we've spoken about place, about logistics, about how all of this has an impact on especially the beginning of when our clients come to us. But I think then where we get to go super deep and where it gets super exciting because it's a lot of inner work is when we talk about purpose, right? So that for our next conversation.
Yes, I look forward to it.